Welcome. It is so wonderful to see you all here. On the eve of Thanksgiving, basically, we are very grateful to be with you. I'm Donna Berman. I'm the Executive Director of the Charter Oak Cultural Center, and I'm really honored to welcome you. So I want to thank you for joining us for the inaugural lecture of the Ada Maria Isasi-Diaz Institute. This is a very exciting night, and we really are very, very happy that you're here. We launched the Institute in October with a panel discussion entitled En la Lucha, What is the Struggle for Latinx Women for Us All in 2022? It was a rich and vibrant discussion. Tonight, we have the privilege of learning from Dr. Jennifer Owens Jofré, who will lead us in an exploration of mujerista theology, the theological approach that Ada Maria Isasi-Diaz developed, and what it means for us today. We established this institute for several reasons, among them to make sure that Ada's pioneering work continued to be honored, to ensure that she was not forgotten, to make sure that her brilliant contribution to theology and ethics continues to guide and sustain us, helping us navigate the difficult times in which we find ourselves. Ada was taken too soon. She still had so much to teach us. We are committed to bringing her work forward through the voices and brilliance of other Latinx women scholars, through the voices and brilliance of Latinx women from all walks of life, whose lo cotidiano, whose everyday experience Ada saw as an underexplored, underappreciated place in which the divine, the sacred, the holy can be found. In a Copernican move with profound implications, Ada placed the experience of the women she referred to as grassroots Latinas at the center of her theology, displacing the views and perspectives of elite white men. As I said last time we were together, she shifted the lens and changed the world. What will the future look like for the Institute? Well, each year we will present lectures by both seasoned and emerging scholars, workshops on Ada's method, and all kinds of creative programming, including, we hope, the creation of a theater piece and a book based on the lived experience of Latinx women. So stay tuned for an announcement of our 2023 programming. It will be coming soon, and I promise you that, like tonight, it will be very, very exciting. Ada would love that we are all gathered here tonight. She loved people, and let's face it, she loved the party. She loved the whole court, and she knew how to do that with aplomb. We at the Charter Oak Cultural Center feel deeply honored to be able to take a leadership role in the establishment of the Ada Maria Isasi-Diaz Justice Institute. We are deeply grateful for the support of Drew Theological School and Connecticut Humanities. Their generosity made the panel discussion in October and this inaugural address possible. And special thanks go to Dr. Tracy West, whose wisdom and guidance and friendship have been integral to the process of taking the idea for the Institute and making it a reality. Let me introduce Dr. Owens Jofré to you. Jennifer Owens Jofré, PhD, is a Catholic practical theologian and lay ecclesial minister who serves as a mujerista postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Ignatian Service at St. Louis University and a research associate in the Theology and Religious Studies Department at the University of San Diego. Dr. Owens Jofré is currently crafting a manuscript based on her fieldwork with lay Latina leaders at Dolores Mission Parish, some of whom are with us here tonight. We welcome you. Its title is Taking Up La Virgin's Mantle, a Practical Theology of Accompaniment, and it will launch a Convivium Press series on New Horizons in Latinx Catholic Theology, edited by Dr. Hoffman Ospino of Boston College's School of Theology and Ministry. She is part of the North American Working Group of Doing Theology from the Peripheries, a project initiated by the Migrant and Refugees section of the dicastery for promoting integral human development in Vatican City. Dr. Owens Jofré's academic writing has appeared in the Journal of Feminist Studies in Religion, Journal of Hispanic Latino Theology, Anglican Theological Review, and the International Journal of Practical Theology. She co-edited From the Pews in the Back, Young Women and Catholicism, which was published in 2009 with Kate Dugan, and more of her popular pieces can be found at Commonweal, the Political Theology Network, and America. Dr. Owens Jofré has been awarded grants in support of the work she will discuss tonight from the Forum for Theological Exploration, the Marcula Center for Applied Ethics, and Santa Clara University, and the Hispanic Theological Initiative. I feel that Ada is with us tonight and that she is proud of the Institute and honored that Dr. Owens Jofré has found inspiration in and is building upon her work. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jennifer Owens Jofré.
Thank you so much, Donna, for such a beautiful introduction. And I'd just like to thank you as well for the work that you're doing at Charter Oak, and particularly for taking the step of starting the Ada Maria Isasi-Diaz Justice Institute. I'd also like to thank Dr. Tracy West, who's with us from Drew University's School of Theology. Dr. West introduced Donna and me, it sort of helped me understand a bit more about the good work that she does at Charter Oak, and I'm very grateful to Dr. West for that. And I'd also like to acknowledge a number of special guests who are with us tonight. Some of you who knew Ada Maria, others of you who are from Dolores Mission. There will be time for folks who knew her to share a memory of her or to talk about the impact that she's had on you tonight. And I'm also wanting to acknowledge some of the lay women leaders that I met through my research at Dolores Mission. I see Eli Hidalgo with, thank you, Ellie, and please continue to wave as I name you if you would. And is that Rosa Bonilla? Hi there, Rosa. And Maria Molina. Hi there, Maria. And Maru Villegas. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. It's not an exaggeration to say that without you and the work that you have done and continue to do at the parish and elsewhere, I wouldn't have been able to write the dissertation or the book manuscript on which this presentation is based. Getting to know you is one of the great joys of my vocation, and it is a privilege to share your story and talk about its implications for theology. I'll ask too that you add or modify anything that you might like to at the end of the comments that I've prepared tonight. And I also want to acknowledge Rita Chaires, may she rest in peace, whose spirit and legacy are very much a part of what I'll share with you tonight. In terms of how we'll structure our time together, I'll present on mujerista theology, then open it up for folks to add what they might like about the impact that Isasi-Díaz has had on them personally and professionally. After that, I'll talk a little bit more about what her method has enabled me to learn from the Dolores Mission community. And then open it up to the members of that community who are here with us tonight, again, to add or clarify whatever you might feel moved to share with us. And at that point, we'll open things up to the large group for further discussion. So we'll go ahead and start with the slideshow. Thank you so much, Minu, for handling that for us. I appreciate it.
You all can see that? No? Oh,
So I'm able to see a screen and I don't see the slide just yet.
oh.
Thank you.
Oh, great. Now it's working, huh?
It looks good. Yeah. And we can just move to the next slide. So where are we going? Two sets of guiding questions will guide our conversation tonight. First, what is mujerista theology? Why does it matter? And how might it be further developed? And second, what do the lay Latina women leaders of Dolores Mission teach and model for others? And why is that important? So we'll move to the next slide. So before I talk about Isasi-Díaz's biography briefly, I want to acknowledge that she was part of a first generation of Latina theologians who paved the way for the work of many to follow them. She was one of several, María Pilar Aquino, who is Roman Catholic, Daisy Machado, a Disciples of Christ minister, Loida Martelotero, who identifies as Evangelica, and Elizabeth Conde Frazier, who identifies as Evangelica as well, among others. But we remember Isasi-Díaz in a special way tonight as she's no longer with us. And I want to, alongside her, lift up the work of those theologians who are still with us for the contributions they have made and continue to make, not only to the academy, but also to the church and to society. As Hispanic theologians, they share a common commitment to lo cotidiano, daily living as a theological source, and they often draw on their pastoral experiences and expertise in the work they do in their respective areas of specialization. And we could move back to the previous slide about Isasi-Díaz. Thank you, Mina. So Isasi-Díaz was born in Havana in Cuba, from which she fled with her family when she was 18 and joined the Ursuline sisters here in the States. With the sisters, she did her bachelor's degree at the College of New Rochelle, after which she did missionary work in Peru. She left the Ursuline sisters after she returned to the US and earned 3 master's degrees, a Master of Arts in Medieval History at SUNY Brockport, a Master of Divinity at Union Theological Seminary, and a Master of Theology, a Master of Philosophy, also at Union. She earned her doctorate in Christian ethics at Union Theological Seminary and served as professor of ethics and theology at Drew University until her passing in 2015. A hallmark of her scholarly work was to develop mujerista theology with Sister Yolanda Tarango. After the first book they wrote together, Sister Yolanda returned to pastoral ministry in San Antonio full-time, later earning a Doctor of Ministry degree at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. Most recently, Sister Yolanda has served as Executive Director of Visitation House, which helps economically vulnerable women with young children break generational cycles of poverty and homelessness through education and employment. And we could move to the next slide. So mujerista translates to English as womanist, and Isasi-Díaz employed this term in dialogue with womanist theologians and ethicists. Womanist theologians differ from Black feminist theologians in their engagement with the work of Alice Walker, among other important differences. And while this term is unique among theologians, this term mujerista, it's a term that Latina community agents like social workers, therapists, and community organizers began to use around the same time that Isasi-Díaz was writing. And I'd be curious to learn from others who knew her about whether she might have been in dialogue with those folks in the community who self-identified as mujerista as well. So while mujerista is not a term that would be recognized by those involved in social movements in the Americas, as many scholars have noted, Isasi-Díaz and Tarango employed it to describe their method, which has 4 parts. And we can move to the next slide. So while these steps are intertwined and take place concurrently, the image of a 4-legged stool can help us appreciate mujerista theology. These 4 legs are telling our stories, analysis, liturgizing, and strategizing. Isasi-Díaz and Tarango argue that when Latina women tell their stories, they do 4 things to foster self-determination. First, they claim the events of their lives, along with themselves as persons, are important and relevant. And they become, secondly, the object of their own reflections. They realize that the personal is political, that what happens to them has to do with structural factors about which they have sometimes little say. And lastly, they affirm the ongoing divine revelation that takes place in their lives and within the community. And those 4 points were quotes from Isasi-Díaz. So for her and Tarango, methods of analysis need to be flexible to the situation at hand and focus on connecting the personal and the political, always asking why and what else. For example, why do you think this happened this way instead of that? Or what else? Is there another reason for what happened? Liturgizing continues to affirm the lived experience of Latina women, in that the sense of unworthiness Hispanic women feel when they participate in official worship services is negated, close quote, also from Isasi-Díaz. Equally integral to this process is strategizing, which aims to equalize power, to disrupt the way things are, in the interests of transforming power over into power to. And strategizing for Isasi-Díaz is a key piece of this process of self-determination. All 4 steps can equip Latina women to further exercise their power, to transform oppressive structures, and address productively the impact. I beg your pardon, I'm having a bit of technical difficulties. The impact those oppressive structures have on their lives. And we can move to slide 6, method. The theological source of mujerista theology is lo cotidiano, which tells of daily living. Mujerista theology interprets the daily living of Latina women and helps make meaning of it. One can think of lo cotidiano as the resources of daily living on which mujerista theologians draw as the experiences of Latina women that inform theological construction. For Isasi-Díaz, lo cotidiano is multi-layered. It's descriptive, it's interpretive, and it practices meaning making. So key to these tasks of lo cotidiano is a grasp of the impact of, quote, the intersection of racism, ethnic prejudice, classism, and sexism, close quote, on the lived experiences of Latina women. One must acknowledge the impact of these and other intersecting oppressions on the lives of Latina women in speaking of lo cotidiano. For Isasi-Díaz, mestizaje and mulatez are the embodied sites from which mujerista theology unfolds. And she uses those terms to describe elements of racial mixedness in a way that emphasizes community. These terms are traditionally associated with the racial mixing of Spanish colonizers with indigenous groups, in the case of mestizaje, as well as mixing of Spanish colonizers with members of Black communities in Latin America, in the case of mulatez. an idea to which Mexican philosopher José Vasconcelos contributed in the 1940s. Mestizaje refers to, quote, this sense that we are actively contributing to the creation of a new race, la raza cósmica, the cosmic race, close quote. For Isasi-Díaz, this term speaks to the liminal space many Latina women occupy between the countries from which their families came and the United States. She writes, nothing says it better than a popular saying, un dicho from Venezuela. Aquí todos somos café con leche, unos más café, otros más leche, meaning here we are all coffee and milk, some more coffee, others more milk, close quote. Mulatez is another way of thinking about the bringing together of race, culture, and history that describes Afro-Latino experiences. These theological loci reserve a special and even privileged place for racial mixedness in mujerista theological construction. Other Hispanic theologians have questioned the legitimacy of these loci, especially Nestor Medina and Robin Henderson Espinosa. These critiques are concerned about the historical realities to which those terms point, and how the physical, sexual, and psychological violence of the conquest is largely erased in Isasi-Díaz's reclamation of them. Speaking for myself, we would do well to heed these critiques. We can move to the next slide. To understand Lo Cotidiano more fully, Isasi-Díaz engages with the work of Harold Garfinkel, a social psychologist who spent the latter years of his career teaching and researching at the University of California at Berkeley. Garfinkel is best known for his work on ethnomethodology, which challenges traditional methods of sociological inquiry that engage individual subjects without considering the fullness of their individual histories. Isasi-Díaz explained that she used ethnomethodology because its, quote, first presupposition is that people have and use practical rationality. That is, people accomplish everyday life, close quote, and that all people are well qualified to describe their own lived experiences. She uses ethnomethodology to make room for grassroots Latino women to join theological construction in a way they may not have had the opportunity to do so before. For Isasi-Díaz, quote, the test will be whether or not Hispanic women say, yes, this is my life, this is what I understand, this is what I mean, close quote. In addition, she draws on meta-ethnography from the field of sociology. She explains, quote, the meta-ethnography I use does not attempt to aggregate the information gathered in interviews, but rather to interpret it. First, I present the different accounts as they were actually voiced by Hispanic women. I then attempt to bring together the single accounts by pointing out some of their commonalities and differences. And this results in what meta-ethnography calls knowledge synthesis, a synthesis that is both inductive and interpretive, close quote. Meta-ethnography in general connects the perspectives they share with their daily lives. In addition, the way Isasi-Díaz utilizes meta-ethnography acknowledges the diversity of perspectives inherent among Latino women. These are the sociological tools she used to understand more fully these experiences. They were at the cutting edge of sociological inquiry at the time at which Isasi-Díaz wrote, and they were helpful to her in establishing credibility in sociological circles. In conversation with Deborah Ross, a practical theologian at the Jesuit School of Theology, who served as the second reader on my dissertation committee, we determined that I would use grounded theory. So instead of ethnomethodology or meta-ethnography. Grounded theory prioritizes the voices of the participants, similar to the way that meta-ethnography does, but it engages more productively the difference in the power to interpret what is being said between researchers and participants. Initiated by Anselm Strauss and Juliet Corbin, grounded theory is inductive. So it sort of works sort of bottom up in terms of interpretation and starts with the coding or labeling of interview transcripts and field notes, moving from those codes to sort of themes across those labels, from themes then to categories, and from categories to theory. Barney Glaser defines grounded theory as, quote, the discovery of emerging patterns in data. Grounded theory is the generation of theory from these patterns, close quote. Most systematic theologians use a deductive approach to theology, starting with a particular insight related to Catholic teaching, to church teaching, and providing a rationale from there, often using tools from philosophy. What Isasi-Díaz has done is much more similar to the work that practical theologians do, starting with practice, engaging with aspects of the tradition to which that practice relates, and turning to a renewed practice. And instead of philosophy, she uses qualitative methods from the social sciences, namely sociology and psychology. So we'll move to the next slide. And this image is from Cerezo Barredo, Minocena Ecológica. Isasi-Díaz explains that mujerista theology is rooted in the lived experience of Latinas, which births a liberative praxis. The lived experience of Latina women takes place, as she describes it, within the context of la lucha, the struggle to meet basic needs, a struggle that is directly related to socioeconomic realities, racial and ethnic backgrounds, and gender. In turn, praxis is a process of action and reflection. These two steps are inextricably linked and cannot be divorced from one another. Mujerista theologians are equally committed to both parts of this dialogical process. This process of praxis is dialogical in the sense that it brings together members of the community with enablers of reflection, all participants in the process being on, as Isasi-Díaz would describe it, an equal footing. In turn, this process of praxis contributes to the conscientization of all participants. A concept Brazilian popular educator Paulo Freire introduced in the early 1970s and developed throughout his body of work, conscientization, quote, must be a critical attempt to reveal reality. It must be related to political involvement. There is no conscientization if the result is not the conscious action of the oppressed as an exploited social class struggling for liberation. What is more, no one conscientizes anyone else. The educator and the people together conscientize themselves thanks to the dialectical movement, which relates critical reflection on past action to the continuous struggle, close quote. For mujeristas, doing theological work is empowering on an individual level in the sense that it reminds all of us of the importance of the experiences of Latinas, but it also does this on a systemic level in the sense that it claims space for stories that are too often marginalized in our classrooms, letting those stories speak to the liberative ways theology can be engaged and imagined anew. For Isasi-Díaz, mujerista theology is a kind of liberation theology, a praxis, quote, not a reflection upon action, but a liberative action in and of itself, close quote. She has argued that if what is good for Latina women is truly good, it will be good for all people. To that end, quote, Proyecto Histórico is based on this universal principle of life and fullness of human life liberation. In and of itself, however, the Proyecto neither dictates nor prescribes other universally valid ethical principles, nor specific forms of government, economic systems, or societal arrangements, close quote. In this way, the guiding principle of El Proyecto Histórico is access. For El Proyecto Histórico to advance the kingdom of God, all must have access to the fullness of life to which the Paschal mystery points. And we'll move to the next slide. So why does this method matter? The image on the slide is John August Swanson's The Peaceable Kingdom, a visual representation of Isaiah chapter 11. While I imagine that Isasi-Díaz would have used kingdom language to describe this egalitarian future, I wonder whether she might have said Isaiah's vision is what she was working toward. Her method matters because it makes room for Latina women to talk about and engage in self-determination. It's not that this wouldn't happen without mujerista theology, but it does provide further opportunity to name lived experience to make meaning of them together. It uniquely amplifies the experiences, expertise, and wisdom of Hispanic Latina women and treats them as the sources of theological construction they are by putting them in dialogue with related aspects of theology, like Mariology and Christology. And at this point, I'd like to open it up for conversation in a few moments. But for now, I'm just going to invite us to take about 2 minutes of silence to digest what's been percolating for us. You can write down thoughts or questions you might like to bring to the large group during this time, or however you want to make use of those 2 minutes. And when they're up, we'll open it up again to hear memories of Isasi-Díaz from folks who knew her, as well as other questions and comments. So we'll take about 2 minutes starting just now. So I think Donna and I are going to facilitate this together, but I'm curious if folks are moved to share a little bit about memories of Ada Maria first. And you're welcome to raise your hand physically or to lift it up using the Zoom reactions.
I'll start. I was just in, thank you for that. First of all, thank you for that wonderful presentation. So clear, so inspiring, so beautiful. And the images were just beautiful. I didn't say that at first because I was going to say thank you so much for the meditation. I was so deep into it that I just kind of forgot where I was for a moment. And what came to me was, I have to find it. I have a picture of me and Ada. And I think it was when I got my master's at Drew. And she was, you know, she had her whole PhD regalia on. And I was, you know, I just got my master's. And I think I took her hat and I put it on my head. And we are, in that picture, we are just laughing. And Ada was a very, in so many ways, such a serious person, and obviously a serious scholar, but she really also had a lot of joy in her, a lot of life in her. And when she would laugh, it was like the heavens opened up. And that was the memory that surfaced for me. And I'm very grateful that that came back to me. Thank you for that.
More thoughts, questions to offer, comments to share?
Jennifer, this is Rochelle. I am just so moved by your thoughts. And this is the first time really that I'm coming into who Ada Maria Isasi-Diaz is and this whole work. And thank you so much for the invitation. I come from Network, for those of you that I don't know on this screen here. But I was very moved, and I just have so many questions because I'm so inspired, you know, to call something a mujerista theology, just as an outsider and somebody who is feeling this. It begs the question of, you know, what were the political realities that even brought this to be a mujerista theology? What were the social conditions? Because, you know, when you think of, as I think about it, it begs the question, you know, is this in the face of macho theology, right? Or what was going on here? And so just having that background, you know, kind of really helps also. I mean, I understand feminism or womanist work to the extent that I am, and I'm living in such a space where I'm discovering that and helping to surface that for myself. But yeah, I'm just going to stop there to say, how did it become mujerista? And why not just Latina theology? Or
No, I appreciate so much not only sort of the sentiments that you're sharing, Rochelle, but also the question that you're raising in particular. And I would defer to Donna and to Tracy, who knew her, and I think knew her very well. I never met her. She passed away in 2015. I was in the comp space of my work at the GTU. So again, I would defer to the two of you about this. But the first thought that comes to my mind has to do with an example that she used in her writing. There was a lot of talk about family values when she was writing one of her books. I want to say that would have been the 1980s. Is that right? Like Dan Quayle around then? Yeah. And a lot of criticizing, frankly, and not so much critique, but like just very critical of Hispanic families that were headed by single mothers who were working outside the home. And she was sort of saying, like, we need to redirect this critique, right? Like these women are sort of making the most of a difficult situation as single moms. Like the need to work outside the home is in fact a need, right? That's caused by an unjust socioeconomic situation where the folks on the top have a lot and the folks on the bottom don't. So she was sort of encouraging a focus on those structures, particularly socioeconomic structures, and that sort of interplay between economic class and race and ethnicity and gender. And so she was saying, like, this is where we need to sort of focus our attention, right? And not to sort of be in judgment of folks who are kind of navigating a situation that is unjust. But I'm curious to hear too from Donna and from Tracy about your sense of Rochelle's question in terms of kind of the politics to which she was responding.
You know, it's a tough question. So I'm Tracy, and I worked side by side with Ada Maria Isasi-Diaz as a faculty member, and the two of us were the two faculty teaching Christian ethics for well over a decade. So when you said to call up a memory, I thought, wow, there are just so many and lots of differing situations and circumstances and meetings, faculty meetings, and women's faculty, so there's just lots and lots of them that come to mind, and working with students, etc. But I think Jennifer, your narrative has been so beautifully crafted tonight, that allows us to see the kinds of sources, the method, and also the beauty and fabric of the way in which this work evolved out of grassroots engagement and conversations. So it doesn't feel correct to say it's in response to kind of heteropatriarchal aggressiveness. Of course, lots of battles in the Catholic Church were really influential with sexism and patriarchal authority and abusive authority were really important sort of battlegrounds for the ways in which I would say Ada was formed, but the work, I think the work much more comes out of the conversations and the influences of the women in grassroots communities and churches, and especially the church that she essentially pastored, that continued to meet outside through all kinds of weather, and in New York. So that would be my response. Which is the memory, though. The one piece I would want to say, which is tangential, is Ada was involved in a lot of conversations with other scholars, peer scholars, and some of the anthologies that there's just so many anthologies, early feminist theology and feminist ethics anthologies with very differing kinds of scholars who across differing race and class backgrounds who tried to create a project that was dialogical. So I want to say that was also a really important influence in her work, and very intentional to be a part of, several different groups. Sometimes they were published volumes. God's Fierce Whimsy is one that comes to mind immediately. But there are several of them that she was involved in, and sometimes there were publications that came out, and then sometimes, right, Donna, they were discussion groups and coalition building, activist scholar building. So those networks were really crucial for how she shaped her voice, and the conversations were really lively, sometimes contentious, but in a way that was productive.
I'll just add in, I don't think we can underestimate the impact of Katie Cannon's work on Ada's work too, and the kind of rejection of the word feminist, and trying to really carve out a brand new space that was specifically for women and women's voices. So it wouldn't be Latino, it's really about Latinx women. And I don't even know, by the way, that's another discussion, but what the terminology is now, Latino women, Latinx women. Ada used grassroots Latinas as her term, but she was really carving out a space, a safe space for women's voices, and as a source of the sacred.
More thoughts, Rochelle?
No, thank you. I didn't even know how to ask the question that was surfacing for me, but clearly this work was situated in a particular time and in a particular reality that we're
Mhm.
still living today, while at the same time, it's an
Mhm.
and moving forward, an and that is from the sacred, right? And so it then must transcend the reality of the time. If I don't know how else to explain that, but moving it into the sacred and the spiritual of the lived experience of it. And so that's what I heard. That's what I'm taking away. And so I appreciate that, but it's very instructive to give that context, though, you know, how it became mujerista, what political or social economic realities, what conditions were going on at that time to that the seed became so. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. And I see that Leslie has unmuted. Leslie, do you have some things to say?
Hey, Jen.
Hey.
Wow, this is great. I am familiar with the term mujerista theology, and I didn't realize, still don't know how widespread the term is. So what I realized while you're talking is that I have her book, Mujerista Theology. It's I used it when I was working as part of an editorial team, and I would buy books that resonated with me. And so the book is actually not here with me right now because of my move. So I'm looking forward to getting to it again to spend more time with it. But I'm really excited to realize this connection that this is about the author of the book that I have. And I appreciate hearing you speak that that the concept of mujerista theology is connected to womanist theology. And that's even more intriguing, that there's that intentionality with her using that term. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Leslie. And we'll go to Shawnee in just a moment, but I'm seeing that in the chat, Sarah Nahar is saying, I'm traveling and my signal is spotty. So she's sharing this reflection in the chat. She says that she thinks often on the time in seminary when she read for the first time Isasi-Díaz's construction of kingdom, right? Family as opposed to kingship. I felt enlivened, relieved, and so moved by this idea. I write a lot of liturgy now, and this is my go-to for articulating ideal community among those committed to building sacred community. And she says too that she always cites her for kingdom. So thank you for that, Sarah. And Shawnee has a hand up too, please.
Sarah just took my thunder. I never met her, but I took a class with Donna. That is one thing I remember from that book, was the whole idea of kingdom. We're all related, we're all connected, and dang it, we better start knowing that or we're not going to survive.
Well, on that note, I think it might be a moment to sort of transition to continued conversation that is focused on some of what I continue to learn from the women at Dolores Mission. Would that work for you, Mina?
Yeah.
And Jennifer, can you tell us where Dolores Mission is?
Yeah, so that's actually the first slide, but I can just say
Oh, okay.
briefly that that it's in Boyle Heights in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay. So it is the Dolores Mission that I'm thinking
Yeah.
of. Okay.
Yeah,
I live in
and-
Los Angeles.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it's in the Archdiocese of LA. And Ellie, is that where you are now? I love it. Do you want to say a little more?
I live in Miami, Florida now, but I worked at Dolores Mission for 12 years in ministry with Maria Molina and Rosa Bonilla. And I came because of Rita Chaires, who passed away on October 18th, and we just had her massive resurrection. Just a prophet, a huge diaconal giant leader in our community.
Thank you, Ellie. And we'll talk a little bit more about Rita too. So I'm very grateful to J. Michael Walker for having given me permission to use his sketch of her
Okay.
in one of the slides that we'll see. But I feel like her spirit is very present tonight. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Maria wants to say something.
Please, please, please. Hi there, María.
Solamente quiero decirte que gracias por esto que estás haciendo. Estoy muy orgullosa y muy feliz de cuando tú empezaste a venir aquí a Dolores Mission y hacer tus reportajes y todo. Y yo por mi parte siento mucho orgullo y mucho gusto ver cómo estás escalando, como Eli también. Están ahí trabajando, sirviendo. Esa es mi vitamina para mí. Again, I love you. I miss you.
I love you too. I miss you too. Sorry, I'm very emotional.
I miss you.
No puedo expresar en español todo el sentimiento que me siento ahorita, María, pero gracias. Gracias con todo de mi corazón.
Igualmente, Jen. Un abrazo.
Un abrazo a ustedes. Maria was just sharing her pride in the work that we're doing tonight and the work that Ellie is doing with discerning deacons, the work that we're talking about now, and for the kind of service that is being done through this. And I'm just really very moved, Maria, and I miss you. I miss your community very much. Rosa, ¿hay algo que le gustaría añadir antes de empezamos?
Ya, no más, igual un placer saludarte y recordar el trabajo que hicimos. Hace unos 3 o 4 días antes de recibir tu invitación, estaba mirando y leyendo la agenda de la mañana de retiro que tuvimos unos años cuando estabas haciendo esto, y ayer que recibí la invitación fue una sorpresa y seguir orando por ti. Me encanta porque al escuchar hablar sobre este reino, sobre las similitudes que todos tenemos, es hermoso, ¿no? Me encantó ese dicho que dijiste, porque es algo que pienso, todos tenemos algo del otro, y ¿verdad? Entonces, me encanta, Jen, muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias a ustedes, de veras. Rosa was just...
Trabajo hermoso que están haciendo. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a ustedes. Rosa was just describing this work that we're doing together as beautiful. She was remembering what it was like to sort of spend that time together at Dolores Mission. And Rosa actually coordinated a morning of reflection that I had led early on in my time there. We did a sort of Advent morning of reflection, used Ignatian spirituality and some other resources. And she was saying, just before she received this invitation to join us tonight, she had found some, the notes from that. And she was saying, thank you for that. And I just feel a deep gratitude to this community for the way that they welcomed me with open arms. And I mean, I think Rosa did like all of the phone calls to make sure, like, not only was there an invitation sort of, in the announcements, but I'm fairly certain Rosa was on the phone quite a bit, sort of reaching out to folks and saying, come for this morning of reflection, come from this little, mini retreat. So I continue to offer my gratitude to all of you for the many ways that you've been of support to this work. And we'll have some more time after we talk a little bit more about Dolores Mission and what I've learned from you all to reflect a little further on that. But thank you so much. Are we ready, Minu?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, you want to go next slide?
Yes, please. Thank you. So this photo here with Our Lady of Guadalupe in the foreground and the Plaza of Dolores Mission in the background was taken by Dan Morris of the National Catholic Reporter. And I'll use it as a starting point to describe lo cotidiano, the context of daily living at Dolores Mission. If you were to visit Dolores Mission on a Sunday morning, you might park in the parish's small lot and stop at the corner where two women might be selling an assortment of items, the types of items one might encounter at a swap meet: clothing, jewelry emblazoned with Catholic imagery in gold and silver that shines brightly in the Southern California sun, children's toys. And you might smell tortillas being prepared on an outdoor grill on the parish plaza next to the tiny church. On the plaza, you might see women making food, menudo, quesadillas, enchiladas, and mixing agua fresca on the parish plaza to be sold to parishioners and passersby, the proceeds from which usually are donated to a family in need. Not far from the parish grounds, you would encounter streets lined with discount stores showcasing signs that boast 98 cents only, pupuserias owned and operated by local merchants, and increasingly with art galleries and hipster pizza joints. Dolores Mission is in the heart of Boyle Heights, a predominantly Latinx neighborhood that's beginning to reflect some of the racial diversity that characterized it in the early part of the 20th century. With major Southern California freeways outlining the boundaries of its public housing developments and public transportation lines coursing through its main streets, the neighborhood where the parish is located is small, just 16 square miles. It's densely populated and economically poor. Around the parish, rose bushes brighten one-story homes guarded by chain link fences. Today, Boyle Heights is 94% Latinx, 2.4% Asian, 2% white, less than 1% Black, and less than 1% of other racial background. In 2008, the median household income was less than $35,000 per year. In terms of education, this is a quote from the LA Times, 5% of residents 25 and older have a 4-year degree, and almost 70% of residents did not complete high school. Boyle Heights has a median age of 25, making it the youngest neighborhood on the east side. Over 20% of the neighborhood's families are headed by single parents, and half of the neighborhood's residents are born outside of the United States, mostly in Mexico and El Salvador. And we can move to the next slide. While I won't engage the longer history of the parish, I'll start in 1980 when Cardinal Manning turned over the administration of Dolores Mission Parish and School to the Society of Jesus. The website tells of the dialogue that ensued between members of the community and the Jesuits around the question, what is God asking us to do here and now? Their responses have led to the birth of several partner organizations, including what's now Homeboy Industries, Proyecto Pastoral, the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights in Los Angeles, and the East Los Angeles Housing Coalition. The mission of the statement reads, walking with Christ, who suffers, dies, and rises with our people, Dolores Mission, a Jesuit parish, responds to the spiritual, educational, physical, and emotional needs of our community. By listening to our needs, particularly through the Christian-based communities and through grassroots organizing, we partner with outside agencies to allow Christ's healing and transformation, and to raise consciousness about larger issues of justice and peace. So one of the ways that the parish lives into its mission is through using a method for ministry called pastoral en de conjunto, doing ministry together, doing ministry collaboratively. As is often the case in parishes who use pastoral de conjunto, Dolores Mission has a number of comunidades eclesiales de base, or Christian-based communities, small groups of parishioners who gather to reflect on the scriptures together in light of their experiences of life. The animadoras, the animators or leaders of this group, of these groups, share with the pastoral team, especially through Rosa Bonilla, who's with us tonight, we heard from a moment ago. Rosa serves as pastoral assistant, about the fruit of those meetings, and next steps in the parish are determined as a result of that. At Dolores Mission, it is evident that communication is both bottom up and top down, and the sense of communal ownership and contribution to parish life is palpable. After one of our first interviews had ended, Eli Hidalgo, who was serving as the parish's pastoral associate at the time, handed me a sheet of paper with the words "restorative justice" at the top. And a pastoral associate is a lay ecclesial minister on staff who works closely with the pastor to lead the parish. I had not asked a single question about restorative justice during our almost 2-hour conversation. This really is what we try to do here, Ellie explained. The handout, which she used with a support group she ran for those who had lost loved ones to violence, tells of 2 visions of justice: criminal justice and restorative justice. Ellie described restorative justice this way. So in this case, she said, the action to eliminate gangs could have been done with the perspective of demonizing the gang members and trying to kick people out, giving up on people who had made wrong choices. Instead, the action was done with the idea of how do we bring healing into people's lives, both those who have committed crimes and those who have been victims of crime. How do we bring healing to everybody? How do we create an off-ramp to gang activity? How do we show young people that there's another path that they could get out of this and they could develop better lives? So I'm just so grateful to this community that its prayer has always led them to think holistically and to think about including everybody. So when people say mija, mijo, it means everybody, even the young boy who's stolen a bicycle and is vandalizing or doing graffiti. It's like, how do we get him back on track? One of the ways Dolores Mission practices restorative justice is through Las Caminatas por la Paz, initiated by lay Latina women leaders of the parish in the early 1980s. Las Caminatas por la Paz, these peace walks, contribute significantly to the work toward peace in the neighborhood. Mothers who had lost their children to gang violence there began to work with Father Greg Boyle, I'm sure you all are familiar with, given his work with Homeboy Industries and the many books he's published about that ministry. But this is when he was serving as pastor at Dolores Mission. So these mothers who'd lost their children began to work with Father Greg toward peace in the neighborhood. And Las Caminatas por la Paz were an important step in that direction. More common in the 1980s and 90s than they were in 2015 and 2016 when I was with this community. These walks often take place during the summer when violence in the neighborhood calls for a response with most urgency. The walks begin in the parish plaza, where the community gathers around a banner that bears the name of the parish and distributes the candles that guide their steps as the sun begins to set over the skyscrapers of downtown Los Angeles. The choirs lead songs of peace as the women of the parish, often mothers and grandmothers, make their way through the streets of the neighborhood to the site where one of their neighbors has been killed. There, one of the priests of the parish celebrates Mass as an act of service and an act of healing. The message they share with those who have caused the wounds, both literal and physical, is that there is another way forward in making peace with themselves, with one another, with their community, and with their God. In doing so, they reclaim as holy ground the space on which that person was killed, remembering that La Virgencita knew what it was to lose a child to violence, whether state-sanctioned or otherwise. At the very start of Tattoos on the Heart, Father Greg, a former pastor of Dolores Mission, tells of the origins of this ritual. The E.F. Huttons of the community, he writes, when they spoke, people tended to listen. Teresa Navarro and Paula Hernandez needed only to stand and invoke Jesus. We help gang members at this parish because it is what Jesus would do. People applauded and the parish never looked back. Soon the women organized major marches or caminatas, moving through the projects, often in the heat of tension and in the wake of ceaseless shooting. The Comité Pro Paz, the Committee for Peace, as the women called themselves, would move to hotspots, and their gentle praying and singing presence would calm the gang members ready for battle. Close quote. These gatherings were the result of communal reflection that had been taking place over time within the context of the Christian-based communities, as I understand it. The parish organizes itself and makes decisions through these based communities. They have a participatory structure and are most commonly encountered in parts of Latin America where liberation theology has had a strong influence. At the conclusion of his classic work, A Theology of Liberation, Peruvian Dominican priest Gustavo Gutierrez writes, "The theology of liberation attempts to reflect on the experience and meaning of the faith based on the commitment to abolish injustice and to build a new society. This theology must be verified by the practice of that commitment, by active, effective participation in the struggle which the exploited social classes have undertaken against their oppressors. Liberation from every form of exploitation, the possibility of a more human and dignified life, the creation of a new humankind, all pass through this struggle." Close quote. Base communities acknowledge that the kingdom of God is right now and not yet, and that each member of the parish can and should make a difference in bringing it about. The influence of the writings of liberation theologians like these on the functioning of the parish is clear. Father Greg describes the way that base communities functioned at the parish this way. The Christian-based communities were sectors of people in the parish, mainly women, who reflected on the gospel as it impacted their real lives. Their reflection compelled them to extend themselves to the gangs in their areas where they lived, close quote. The women of the base communities called for the construction of a guarderia, a sort of daycare and preschool, and the establishment of Guadalupe Homeless Project, which provides homeless men and women with a place to stay for 90 days, during which they can connect with much needed social services and work on their search for gainful employment, as well as for what would eventually become Homeboy Industries, the best known gang recovery project in the United States. The Guarderías and Guadalupe Homeless Project are just two constituencies within the nonprofit organization connected to Dolores Mission, called Proyecto Pastoral. Homeboy Industries has become a nonprofit of its own, with two office locations, one up First Street from Dolores Mission and another in downtown Los Angeles. And we can move to slide 12. The sketch that you see on the right from Los Angeles artist and friend of Dolores Mission, J. Michael Walker, is of Rita Chaires, who passed away, as Ellie shared with us just a few weeks ago. To describe Rita as a pillar of the parish community is an understatement. She is a prime example of a woman with many gifts to offer, one who walks with Our Lady of Guadalupe, one who has tended her wounds and in turn fosters safe and creative space for others to do so as well. When she and I first met, she shared with me about what it was like to lose two of her brothers to violence in the neighborhood. And she described the grief and the rage that she felt for a long time. Rita explained to me that her mother prayed over all of this, seeking the intercession of La Virgen to touch Rita's heart. While Rita was resistant at first, she returned to prayer with La Virgen and got involved with the Restorative Justice Circle for victim survivors as well as perpetrators of violent crime. Her experience was transformative, and she facilitated similar circles through her work with Healing Hearts, Restoring Hope, up until her death. In Rita's life, I see a witness to the power of resurrection. In the midst of the very real grief and rage she experienced after her brother's passings, La Virgen led her to these circles of healing. She could have remained with that grief and that rage, but instead was moved to tend it not only in prayer, but also in dialogue with others who had been similarly wounded by similar losses and those who had caused such losses. In Rita, I see a woman who listens to the Holy Spirit and follows where she's called to go. As Ellie wrote about recently, Rita was integral in creating a program called Camino Seguro, called Safe Passage, which brought women from the neighborhood, especially mothers and grandmothers, to street corners to accompany children to school when gang violence there was at its peak. The neighborhood had lost a 2-year-old girl named Stephanie when she was caught in crossfire between rival gangs. The Dolores Mission community could have responded to that loss in any number of ways, but they saw that little girl as their own, and they acted in ways to protect other children from a similar fate, even as they worked to provide support and programming through Homeboy and elsewhere to treat the root causes, both individual and structural, of gang violence. The grounded theory I built from the words that this community shared with me explains that because La Virgen accompanies them, they accompany others, especially in their suffering. While I imagine many of you are familiar with the sacred story of La Virgen and Juan Diego, I retell it here, however briefly. La Virgen appeared to Juan Diego, an indigenous catechist, on the hill at Tepeyac in December of 1531, just 10 years after the conquest had ended. To Bishop Zumárraga, she sent him with her message, requesting a place to be in community with those who would befriend her. Twice the bishop rejected his message, but La Virgen visited Juan Diego a third time when he was on his way to help his uncle, who was in poor health. She insisted on his mission once more, this time sending him to collect flowers to show the bishop as evidence of their encounter. He followed her directions and, returning to the palace of the bishop, was granted a third audience. When they met, Juan Diego opened his tilma, or cloak, to show the roses he had gathered to the bishop, and to the surprise of all gathered, the image of La Virgen was revealed on his tilma, where those roses had been. The bishop gathered those needed to build a house of worship in honor of La Virgen, with her image at its center. Juan Diego's uncle was healed, and devotion to La Virgen grew among the people of Mexico. First, devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe among those who practice it at Dolores Mission is more liberative than it is oppressive. And here I'm responding to Chicana feminist scholars who sort of describe, especially early on in their writings, this kind of devotion as sort of necessarily oppressive. When I described beliefs about social and familial roles that 2 interviewees had shared with me as they pertain to their sense of their husbands as heads of their household, they said they asked permission for their husbands to do something in the wider community, but both described how those interactions contributed to experiences of support from their husbands. While some may see the act of a woman asking permission of her husband as an expressive expression of docility, these women at Dolores Mission framed that act in a way that emphasized support and mutuality. While the husband is seen as head of household among these 2 women, the balance of power between the 2 partners in the marriage reflects the way some scholars are attempting to retrieve a sort of positive side of machismo. I imagine that the support they receive from their husbands for the work they do in the community undergirds their ability to do it fully and encourages them to balance their commitments to their parish and their neighborhood, respectively, and to their families. Second, the devotion among members of the parish community to La Virgen fosters individual and communal healing. On an individual level, some of the interviewees at the parish have faith in her intervention for healing of physical illnesses. Alma, who serves as the director of religious education and the parish secretary, described the emotional healing that can come from La Virgen's accompaniment, especially after her husband had passed away. On a communal level, many interviewees would argue that La Virgen has been a key component of what enables them to work toward communal healing in the wake of the gang violence that marked the neighborhood during the 1990s. As Alejandra Benavides described La Virgen's contribution to Las Caminatas por la Paz, quote, "She covers us with her mantle," close quote. In addition, there's more than one way to practice liberative devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe, exercising agency, work for social justice, and finding community in the midst of grief can take shape in a number of ways. A diversity of practices like praying the rosary, offering a testimony at the novena in her honor, organizing events at the parish, births these three themes. On the level of the parish, leadership at Dolores Mission is marked by humility, a virtue Ellie described as associated with La Virgen. She said, out of humility comes this ability to recognize everyone else alongside your own gifts. Out of humility, you can recognize that you are part of the body of Christ, as well as everyone else. And we'll move to the next slide. This image is called My Version of Mary by Fabian de Bora. When I first arrived at Dolores Mission, I was asking questions about the relationship between devotion to La Virgen and women's experiences with gender. I was curious about whether a devotion to her could be liberative. Through the interviews I did there during the winter of 2015 to 2016, so in that first winter, I learned much more than I had initially sought. The last question on my interview schedule had to do with whether there was anything I didn't ask about that the interviewee might like to share with me. In response to that question, Rosa talked about las caminatas por la paz and las misas del barrio. Rosa and others in the parish continued to help me understand that a relationship with La Virgen is hardly limited to one aspect of life, not merely prayer or only gender. She calls those who would walk with her to a praxis of accompaniment that is all-encompassing, affecting all aspects of our lives, individually and communally. La Virgen walks with members of the Dolores Mission community, especially those who are suffering. As they walk together, members of Dolores Mission feel moved to honor her example by accompanying those they see suffering elsewhere. As Ellie said, at Dolores Mission, you see marginalized folks reaching out to those who are even more marginalized than they are. Working class Latinos reaching out to gang members, economically poor folks sharing what they have with those who are homeless. As a woman engages her own suffering, she is provided with a resource and a reserve to be of support to others who are suffering. While grounded theories only apply to the group on whose words they are based, this notion of accompaniment that this community articulates can be empowering for those who are suffering in any number of ways. The movement of these women to accompany others who are suffering as La Virgen accompanies them validates their experience without making their suffering necessary. La Virgen does not ask these women to suffer in order to earn her friendship. I see an example of this in my interpretation of the three movements women leaders in the parish initiate in the community through their founding of Las Caminatas por la Paz, through programs like Camino Seguro, and the many works of Proyecto Pastoral. First, the peace walks acknowledge the reality of violence in the neighborhood. Second, they do not tolerate it. A Jesuit novice serving as a caseworker with Homeboy described his experience of the peace walks in this way. And the sense in that moment, the connection is that only love can heal this. And my experience of peace walks, of why they have been right, is to know that these streets aren't robbed by violence as much as violence will want to rob them, as much as hate would want to perpetuate itself. It's that love. Love can be the only thing that heals. And we move on. We go to a space where we can celebrate Mass to literally bring Christ's body into this space. We honor that experience of life to death or death to life, and still the young people who hang out in the back in tears, hurt and broken, they still know that this space is created so that healing can have a space in the same street. Otherwise, how else do we reclaim this street? Otherwise, how do we experience this? And I just think almost as a kind of witness to the moment, a witness to the catharsis and the healing to begin in small ways, my experience of the peace walks has been one that engages my own commitment to wanting to be a part of a space of healing, to recognizing the role that community plays as a part of healing, close quote. In the ways this novice identifies, the community reclaims the space. They do not tolerate violence, but rather invite those who are involved in it to the healing that comes from healthy love. Finally, through the work of Proyecto Pastoral and Homeboy Industries, whose foundations they laid in the mid-1990s, the community offers alternatives to that violence. Boyle describes the women of Dolores Mission as having passed out flyers to all the foremen of the factories in the neighborhood, asking them to hire former gang members for a program they called Jobs with Justice. Shortly thereafter, women parishioners approached Boyle to lead their job creation efforts, which became Homeboy Bakery. With time, that initial experiment has grown to become known as Homeboy Industries and its accompanying global network of similar efforts. As the website of Proyecto Pastoral explains, responding to critical needs in the community, the founding women organized and created many of the initiatives we carry forth today. These include our Impacto youth programs, a childcare co-op that is now our early learning centers, our leadership development and community organizing network, Comunidad en Movimiento, or Community in Action, and the Guadalupe Homeless Project. Together, our founders built a vision for a better community and worked together to support educational opportunities, economic opportunities, and safety and well-being. As we reflect on 30 years of working with our hearts for social change, we carry forward this continued vision for a more just, empowered, healthy, and safe community in which children and families can thrive. In presenting alternatives to gang involvement, in offering opportunities to strengthen the community, Homeboy and Proyecto present opportunities for recovering and for thriving. The image you see on the slide is called My Version of Mary by Fabian Debora, who is now the executive director of Homeboy Art Academy. When Debora has spoken publicly about his art, he has described it as his way of making beauty out of experiences of pain and of trauma. He talks about making art as an integral part of his recovery from drug addiction and involvement in gangs. This image of La Virgen is close to my heart because Debora created it out of reverence for the women from Boyle Heights, from Dolores Mission, who witnessed to the power of La Virgen in their love for their community. The words and example of these women speak to the wisdom and beauty Debora echoes. They speak to the power of family that extends into beloved community in the face of individualist myths that too often divide us as a church and as a country. And they witness to the resurrection in the face of death, both literal and metaphorical. This parish community's notion that they accompany others because La Virgen accompanied them as a way to show gratitude for the gift of accompaniment is nothing short of transformative. And before moving forward, I'd like to open the floor first to our guests from Dolores Mission to respond. After we hear from them, we'll take a couple minutes of silence before raising insights and questions for discussion with the larger group. So I would look to Ellie, Rosa, Maria, Maru, if you have reflections to share, things to add, things to modify, would be most welcome.
Otra vez le quiero dar gracias a Dios y a la morenita por ti, por todo lo que has podido lograr. Te dije que siempre la morenita iba a estar contigo y que podías lograr tu meta, que ibas a hacer lo que estás haciendo. Porque siempre la morenita te ha cuidado, porque siempre la morenita ha estado contigo, porque aquí te queremos y hemos orado por ti. Y me siento muy orgullosa de poder haberte escuchado y ver y haberte visto. Y gracias a Dios y gracias por invitarme.
Maria was just offering her gratitude for having been invited and was giving all credit to La Virgencita for the work that's being done through this project, among other things. Other thoughts?
Yeah. Nomás decir de que desde que llegué, todas las mujeres que mencionaste, Jen, en este trabajo tan hermoso que han hecho trabajando en esta comunidad, especialmente todas las que trabajaron en los tiempos de más violencia aquí en la comunidad de Dolores Mission alrededor de los proyectos. Han sido un ejemplo para mí, con los que quiero y he podido seguir aprendiendo, trabajando, compartiendo y creo que siendo lo que somos todos, un solo cuerpo con diferentes actividades, diferentes trabajos, pero unidos en un solo pensamiento que es el seguir ayudando, trabajando para, con y por nuestra comunidad. Muchísimas gracias, Jen, por cómo la manera tan hermosa como describiste este trabajo. No lo podíamos haber dicho mejor. Gracias.
Gracias a ti, Rosa, de veras. So Rosa was just saying that she is some of the women that I was describing in my presentation are the women from whom she continues to learn and to work and to share alongside, that their examples sort of provide an inspiration for that work to continue. That, I mean, Rosa is very much a leader in those efforts. And she was saying, you know, the sense that that we are all part of one body with different gifts is an insight that she takes to heart, that this work might continue as violence in the neighborhood does. Is that, Ellie, does that translation do justice to what Rosa said?
Yes. And I would add, Jen, that I just appreciate your grounded theory that because La Virgen accompanies them, they accompany others. I think it's very true. La Virgen just, people feel that accompaniment, and that accompaniment has just always encouraged us to be courageous, courageous in the face of threats of violence, real violence, you know, to be courageous. And it's very much, I would say, like an embodied theology. The women that are wearing the green shirts and are standing outside to make sure that their kids get to school safely or get home safely. I mean, they're witnessing to God's presence with their bodies. They're taking a risk. Sometimes I remember with the, you know, standing in front of the church when there was going to be a funeral that was a risky funeral because it was the funeral of a gang member. And the women knew that if they stood outside the church, that they could prevent violence. You know, the gang members would not enter into violence if the mothers and the grandmothers were outside present. But that requires a lot of courage and faith, and very much feeling that the presence of La Virgen is with us as we do that.
Thank you, Ellie.
Yeah, and I just remember you talk about Rita Chaires. And we went to Mexico for a pilgrimage, and a day before I went to visit Rita, and I asked her, can you give me a blessing? Because I'm going to Mexico to visit Our Lady of Guadalupe, and she gave me a really beautiful blessing. I still cry when I remember. Porque Rita era muy devota de la Virgen.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you for sharing that with us. Maru, do you have thoughts to add?
Yes, Maru.
I see Maru shaking her head no. I appreciate you being here. I see that we're just over time, but I wonder if there are other folks who might like to offer a question or a reflection to the group.
And Jen, I'm gonna have to jump away. So
I understand, Ellie. I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you for having joined us. And I see that Sister Yolanda Tarango has joined us, and I just want to acknowledge that and offer my gratitude, Sister Yolanda, for your being here. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize that I just barely made it. But I'm so grateful to be with you, and it's just so encouraging and energizing. Like, this is music to my ears. So this is wonderful to be in it. To be in this kind of group and hear this kind of testimony. So thank you.
Thank you, sister. Questions or comments to share? Shawnee, I saw that you were lifting up Deborah's book. Do you want to share that with others?
Everything. Beautiful.
Okay. Well, at this point,
Anything that Gregory Boyle does, I'm quick to purchase it. And the fact that he was teaming up artwork with some of his things, I just said, I have to get this. And so the book's name is Forgive Everyone, Everything. And I just happened to have gotten to this page. So when you show that, I'm like, wait a minute, that looks familiar.
Mhm. Yeah, from what I understand, the book is a series of meditations from Father Greg alongside Deborah's artwork.
Yeah, and I've heard him speak a couple of times, and God, man, that guy is something.
Yeah, he really is.
Yep.
Thank you, Shawnee. So I'll go ahead and hand things back to Donna.
What a night, what a gift. Just, Jen, I cannot thank you enough for this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful presentation. And the women of Dolores Mission, you inspire us to, and to be better people and kinder people and more committed people and more courageous people. Thank you for your work. Thank you, Jen, for telling us about it. Thank you for laying everything out so beautifully for us. And thank you, everyone, for being here. I can think of no better way to start the Ada Maria Isasi-Diaz Justice Institute than an evening like this. And I can think of no better way to start the holiday season on this note of hope and love and compassion and courage. Thank you all so much for coming. I wish you blessings of the holiday season and blessings in the new year. And I look forward to seeing you when we do more events in 2023.
Amen.
Blessings to you all.
Thank you.
Jen, you're wonderful. Thank you.
The feeling is quite mutual, Donna. Abrazos, María, abrazos, Rosa, abrazos, Maru.
Abrazos.
Ya, un champurrado, ya viene posada, ya viene la novena, aquí te esperamos.
Oh, gracias por la invitación, María. Espero que pueda, ¿cómo se dice? Estar con ustedes durante la posada. Estaré en San Diego durante, ¿cómo se dice? Los feriados. Y si Dios quiere, estaré con ustedes.
Puedes, aquí te esperamos, ya sabes.
Oh, gracias, querida María. Gracias,
Lovely.
Rosa.
It was an honor to have you with us. It was absolutely an honor to have you with us. Thank you. Thank you, gracias.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jen, we'll be in touch very, very soon, okay?
Sounds really good, Donna. Thank you. And thank you, Minu. Oh my gosh. Thank you for this. Yeah.
That's great. It
All
was
right.
It was amazing. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, Jen, you should get a really good night's sleep tonight. because you have all the things you're doing tomorrow.
Oh,
But
sure.
You did such an excellent job. Such an excellent job.
It's generous of you, Donna. Thank you. And I'm just realizing we're still recording. I wonder if we could
Oh, no,
stop
that's
recording
okay.
a moment.
We'll edit it out. It's okay.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. We'll talk very soon, okay?
I
And
look forward to it, Donna. Thank you.
Will be digging its way to you.
Thank you so much. Leslie and Dad, thank you for being here. It really means a lot.